And welcome back to the 50/50 podcast. The 50/50 podcast presented by Physical Athletics, our proud partners, Physical Athletics. You can find them on all social media platforms at Physical Athletic. That's FYZICAL Athletic, as well as on their website at physicalathletics.com. My next guest, very happy to have him here. Very happy to have him joining us. Our first play-by-play man, our first sportscaster, broadcaster, insert whichever title you want. He is
Commentary announcer, whatever. Yeah,
there you go. There you go. He is from the Texan Live, Mr. Mike Jungblut. Mike, how are you?
All things considered here, I've got a day off. Thankful that our Lake Travis softball team swept their series, so I didn't have to work today. So, when you get a day off at this time of year and a sportscaster, you just try to relish it and recharge the best you can. And this is a good way for me to do it too. So,
absolutely, we're excited to have you. We're glad you're here. Before we dive in and we kind of start talking about the the UIL Texas high school soccer season, the state playoffs, the season that was. Why don't you kind of one of the things, especially since we're excited you're our first play-by-play man on here. Tell us a little bit about yourself and kind of your broadcasting background and what brought you here.
Awesome. Hey, thanks for asking. I started as a play-by-play guy in my small town in Postville, Iowa, really remote northeast Iowa town, less than 2,000 people. Started on a local radio station, just passable play-by-play for a guy who was 17 years old at the time. Wound up going into college, kind of stayed with it while I first attended University of Northern Iowa. I was trying to in between, it was very much do I want to coach? Do I want to broadcast? Do I want to coach? Do I want to broadcast? So that was kind of the Jekyll and Hyde act for a lot of my life. Was I would go into one, and then kind of come back to the other. So I want to go into Brown College and the Twin Cities for broadcast school in about 2007, 2008. Was doing play-by-play for mostly high school football at that time and some occasional other board operating gigs and stuff like that. So after college, I went to a small radio station called KNIA KRLS out of Knoxville and Pella, Iowa. I mean, I grew up in Iowa. I didn't really get out of the state much for up until about 29. I decided just on a whim, I'm out of a job. My lease is up. Oh boy, that's a lot of thunder, but
wow, that was thunder, huh?
Yeah. It was not my spirit, but I was I'm living in Wisconsin at the time, and I was just I'm not enjoying this. I need to do something cool before I turn 30. So put all my stuff in my car. Didn't have a job lined up. Didn't have a place lined up. I'm just going to go take an Airbnb, and I'm going to go to Austin, Texas. Austin, Texas or bust. So found a job pretty quick. I started with a kind of rekindled my sports broadcast dreams back 2015. I started with a company called KMAX Sports with Lake Travis volleyball. And then that just kind of led to everything else after that. I started going to Liberty Hill for basketball and then Dripping Springs for baseball. And I lasted at Dripping Springs probably about 5 to 6 years. Got a background also with St. Michael's, Lake Travis basketball, postseason baseball. I was just full on head in, I'm going to find a way to try to keep going up the ladder. And then about a year and a half ago, we started doing a legal poker streaming show called TCH Live, which is probably one of the top streaming shows in the country at this point, as far as for our particular format. So
nice.
I took it just a random chance to hope maybe I can just eke out a living here in Austin, Texas. And then just this before this started this last year, I moved from my previous company to go just cover Lake Travis pretty much straight across the board for Texan Live, and also get a lot of really good postseason assignments for stuff like NFHS and with Texan Live.
Great. That's good. So just kind of curious what, you grew up in Iowa, you spent some time in Minnesota. So you're, a Midwest kid. What led to Austin? Was it just kind of a dart at the map, or?
It was, honestly, a friend of mine and a guy who was a big soccer fan, he got a band. So this was literally going to be our plan in 2010. He was going to take the band down to Austin, Texas, And it was like, hey, this cool place. You got barbecue and live music, and it sounded like a utopia. We wound up going to La Crosse, Wisconsin, where I just kind of played underground poker, and I worked a lot of different odd jobs, and I had a pretty good time there with some occasional broadcast stuff. I did some podcasts. I was trying everything I could to kind of break into that town of La Crosse, Wisconsin, and it just kind of wasn't working out. So all of my friends started leaving. They were either graduating college or they were finding new jobs, and I'm kind of sitting there by myself going like, well, I wanted to go to Austin. Like, why don't I just go? Like, nobody.
Right.
So it was definitely a risk. Like, my parents are like, are you sure you're going to be able to pull this off? And it was just like, take a shot here. The worst that can happen is you have to go home. So it was devoid of a lot of logic and common sense, and it was a really bad risk. And I got kind of lucky that it was able to work out. So.
That's good. That's awesome. Well, hey, that's our gain collectively in the Texas high school sports community. So, all right. So, Mike, so tell us, before we get into a little bit more of the soccer piece, describe to us your experience this year throughout, because obviously you covered multiple sports.
Oh,
but
everything.
yeah, describe to us your season or your experience, I should say, throughout this year as a broadcaster. We went with COVID, winter storms, the snowpocalypse that you all had out there, all of that. Describe that experience this year.
I mean, this has been one of the most chaotic yet busy years I can ever remember having. Obviously, once we come back, there's a lot of fear, especially we're going into volleyball gyms. Like, we have a distance, we got to wear masks. So, like, I have to get used to broadcasting with a mask on sometimes in some of these places. And, you're not in some of your favorite spots if you like to be courtside because they want people kind of off the floor. And there was no complaint by me because you are at lockstep and like, hey, I don't want to interfere here on this. So I was thankful enough to have a lot of experience that I was able to adjust to it, and it wasn't anything like, I don't know how to do this or I don't like this. It's just it became more important because the fact that there were not as many fans allowed in. So, that put even a bigger emphasis on people like us to try to do our jobs as best as they can, because they don't want to pay a subscription and turn on a site and go, this guy's an idiot. Like, what the heck is he doing? I mean, there might still be a portion of the audience that does say that, but
right.
Yeah, I mean, you're just gonna have it. Like, it's unavoidable. There's just people that are kind of naysayers and stuff like that. But majority of the feedback I've always received has been great. So appreciative of that. So as far as with Texan Live, this was a new company to me, like a competitor for another one. So it was out of all the familiarity that I was so used to for 5 to 6 years, and to step in with new crews, new producers, new bosses, and different priorities. Because when I worked at the last company, it was you're hired by the booster club. They write out a contract, and you're just Homer. You're Homer. You basically are out on an island. Whereas now with streaming at Texas Live, which is wonderful, because we have high quality cameras, great producers, people that are helping. I had to kind of dial back my style and adjust it more for video. So it's been an amazing year, all things considered. I feel bad saying it because it is still the times that we're in, but this has been one of the best years of my career.
Right. No, that's great. From obviously listening to you, some of your broadcasts, which of course at the time I didn't realize that was you, because we hadn't met yet, but no, you did.
Some Lake Travis soccer, and
yeah.
I'll let you continue though.
No, absolutely. No, I just thought it was great. I just thought it was great in terms of the quality of, your play-by-play calls. And we'll get into that a little bit more. But
I was never more nervous in my life than once I took the soccer assignments, because I was a casual is the best word to describe that. I mean, I've watched the World Cups. I remember the first ones I watched were like 2006 World Cup, where Zidane like headbutts the guy, and it's still the funniest thing I've ever seen in my life in a live sports event. And I followed it very casually, but I had backgrounds in football, baseball, basketball, volleyball, there's one I'm obviously I miss softball. So like I've covered a wide spectrum that they're like, okay, we need somebody to do soccer. Do you want to do it? And I'm like, I know Lake Travis is really good, and the parents are passionate about it. The principal, I think, is like, it's his favorite program. So, it was really unique because I mean, this is what I'll even show this to you of like the preparation I had to do to try to get to like okay level where I didn't feel like I was going to have a panic attack. Like, I mean, I have so many papers of glossaries, vocab, rosters that, I mean, I have a high standard to follow, so I didn't want to go out there and just do okay because,
Right.
I mean,
Right.
that happened to Gus Johnson. Like Gus, the very, I don't know
Oh,
if you
yeah.
know Gus Johnson. Like
Yeah.
he was a fantastic football and basketball broadcaster, and Fox Sports decided like, let's let him do Premier League matches, and everybody in Britain hated him.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Yeah.
I was
Yeah.
so afraid of that to be like, is this finally something I suck at? Am I not good at this? Is going to be okay? So like, if you found it to be satisfactory, like that's a win in my book.
Yeah, no, it was great. It was, yeah, I know you talk about Gus Johnson. I think we kind of quickly figured out that, just because you have experience in calling different sports, it's like they vary. They all have their own particular, etiquettes and obviously their nuances, and soccer especially, and soccer because it's a very fluid sport. But, you just got into that a little bit, but you talked about it, this was your first crack at soccer, right? And it was going into the state playoffs, and
Yeah.
you talked about your prep, and I know along the way, you were spending a lot of time prepping, as you mentioned, and again, because of those standards, but along the way, as you were covering the game, going through the playoffs, right, working for Texan Live. So, because on top of all of that, you're doing this with a new company, right? So, but what surprised you the most about covering the game, particularly during the state playoffs, covering soccer?
I mean, the first matches I did were I think either regional quarters or regional semis. We had a doubleheader for the Lake Travis played Westwood on the men's side, and then the girls played Round Rock, which was 2 matches back to back. So I was really shocked at how fun it was to do, just because it's such a living, breathing thing as a broadcaster, where every sport's got its own uniqueness to it. Like baseball and softball is a very cadenced, sing-songy, like you get 2 balls and a strike, and you kind of go into a character to a degree with some of these, and it just amazed me how much like the build up to the big moment. It's everything's kind of flat for a while. They're just games kind of in between the 20s, and all of a sudden somebody busts through, and like you've got to be on it
Right.
at all times, because somebody could blast one in, and if you're looking out at the stars or something, you could just totally blow a call. So on the state championship side, like the passion for it, I think was something that was really unique. That really kind of caught my eye, as far as a lot of the so academy kids that wound up hopping into some of these programs that were previously ineligible for, and just it showcased how much of that training is so integral and important to being able to take a team past like where you may expect them to be able to go.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, I can extrapolate that as far as what does that mean for the long term of the sport? Can we as a whole keep raising the floor a little bit, so those at the top continue to become a fantastic players that eventually, like as this country goes, like we're maybe catching up to some of the other ones, but I don't know if that's something realistic for the next 10, 20 years or so.
Right. So did you feel, I guess, and I've kind of asked this to the coaches that I've spoken with, the champion coaches, but did you get a feel, did you know, even though this was your first time really kind of diving into coverage, play-by-play for soccer, but were you surprised by within the sport, the high school game, were you surprised by the communities, or did you get a higher level of excitement, and then also maybe just coverage of the sport, the high school game? It's obviously not saying that it's football, but
sure. I mean, nothing ever will be
Yeah,
Um,
but did you notice any of that? Did any of that get your attention?
one thing I've noticed in the 5, 6 years of covering all these different programs, and I'm thankful that I've gotten to go from 4A to 5A to 6A, Northwest Austin to Lake Travis, so like Liberty Hill, Lake Travis, Dripping Springs. So I've had a bit, at least enough experience to understand like a lot of these programs are on an island. So, you
Hmm.
know, whereas where I grew up, like all of these things were kind of interconnected. Like all your
Right.
programs are attending each other's games because you live in a small town and there's nothing else to do. So the fact that I think all these programs are on an island and you're trying to create your own hype through social media, create your own following, it's tougher for fans to get in the game because a lot of these kids, when you go a higher level up, you got club tournaments, they've already got their academic demands, and they also kind of want to be a kid or a coach or a parent at some point during the days. So it when you get teams that have a lot of hype, people will go and follow it, and they'll root for the friends, and they'll be all for it. Media wise, I was really surprised, like preparing just how much is out there, especially from like your guys' like Lethal Enforcer, all the newspapers that had good like previews and pieces, and at least try to get some of the human element that I don't know how many years ago if that would have been a huge priority for a Dallas Morning News to have all
Right.
layouts of all the previews, or
Right.
the Cal
Right.
Allen papers talking about how much it's impactful to their community, just the fact that they're the first one out of their area to ever make a state championship game. So you know there is a hunger for soccer, but it's also like we were talking the other night, like volleyball has the same issue that it's like there's so many great things to follow in sports. It's like, what is it that helps it take over the top that people take more interest in? Really shines a light on the best parts of some of these sports and athletes that, my gosh, a lot of high level players here in the state in all sports.
Yeah, absolutely. You talk about, you bring up a great point there because there was a lot of what I really liked about this season was it was a season of a lot of firsts
Yeah.
from the standpoint of you just mentioned Cal, you had Cal Allen, the first school out of the Corpus Christi area, making a state tournament, and then making a final, and then you had
Diamond Hill
you know
Jarvis, first one out of Fort
right,
Worth that
right,
ever made it.
first one out of Fort Worth ISD, Diamond Hill Jarvis. You also had, you had other stories like Dripping Springs, a small hill country town winning a 5A state title, the second largest classification in the state. You had Snyder High School, Snyder Boys Program winning their first, getting their first playoff victory by district round, I believe it was. Um,
You had
early in the
Rockwell Heath
tournament.
that was third in their district, and
Yeah, yeah,
there was a lot of different uniquenesses as far as good moments to at least be able as a broadcaster to be able to talk about
right.
for some of these and during some of these matches.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, and even now you're seeing it now. The Snyder getting their first playoff victory, and it's a small school, probably more like probably a 3A competing at a 4A level
Yeah,
school, a program that's in its third year of its existence, and they get their playoff victory. Out here, I know I shared this with you the other day. Fabens High School, which is on the outskirts of the county, kind of more of a rural, small town area outside of El Paso here, just being named the new 4A program. They're going to start a program starting next year. So, I mentioned all these moments because I kind of wanted to hit on whether it was in game, post game, leading up to a game, pre-game, what have you. Are there What's a moment that really sticks out in your mind over the course of the playoffs, for maybe one for the boys and one for the girls? What's one kind of real vivid moment that sticks out to you?
um, boy, vivid moments of things that were really probably
Maybe.
Riley Assistant School for Dripping Springs when it was pretty even. It's just berries one from like 25 yards out. No big deal. Was
Yeah.
that one Riley Baker School, I think in Flower Mound against Vandy, like that was really tight. match all the way, very physical, and
Mm-hmm.
just at the timing of it, what was remarkable. The Lake Travis San Antonio Lee was by far, I'm sweating the first like 20 minutes of it because I mean, you're just amazed. Like, this is a regional final game. Like, these guys are both good enough to win it all, and this is what we have here. So,
Right.
probably the PKs. I know for like Travis, it's a sore spot. I know you guys have talked about it. That it was a
Mm-hmm.
it was a weird moment. I mean, I think once you get a PK, it's like you know
Yeah. It's a coin toss.
the game's
Coin
got to
toss.
end somehow. It's not. I don't think
Yeah.
everybody's favorite way to have to end a
Right.
match by any stretch. So it's that's kind of the variance of the game. But I mean, just the experience of seeing like two high level teams, two fan bases going nuts during certain moments. You had kids stepping like Bethke, the really talented striker kid from Lake Travis,
Right.
hurts his ankle in
Lake
the
Travis.
first overtime, and I'm just thinking like, there's no way this kid is coming back. And guts out the second OT, tries to get one in at PKs, and it didn't work out. But
Right.
I mean, it was so unique to me as a guy that called the game that before I just felt like I was watching it, and now once you start broadcasting, you start seeing it, you start anticipating it, you start understanding why a guy has to be big and fast at center back to be able to defend. Like that, there's still a ton of things I really don't know. That doing color commentary for the state championship game was just like, okay, all right. I'll try to be funny and be as observant as I can. I couldn't tell you formation to a degree, but give me enough time. I think leading into next year, I might be a little bit more on top of that. So I hope to be able to do that some more.
Yeah, that's good. That's great. I have no doubt you'll continue to raise your game. But yeah, you mentioned that Lake Travis San Antonio Lee matchup, and it was an unbelievable game. It was like neither team willing to really relent, give up. That it was constant back and forth, and
right.
What even in you go through two extra time periods. They're headed to penalties, and even in penalties, and we've talked about it obviously, but even in the penalties, it was literally a back and forth. And then obviously there was a highly controversial call where the Lake Travis goalkeeper makes the save, and then the AR assistant referee signals he came off his line. Kudos to the San Antonio Lee striker for finishing it the second time. That's a lot of pressure there. But it just seemed like that was the final critical moment where momentum swung the other way for good, I guess. Because
I mean, you talk about that match. The first half was 0-0. Like they were really not able to get a lot of quality chances during that first half. There was really just defended pretty well. There were some moments of daylight, but it wasn't like one team clearly dominated the other. Then the second half, like Travis came out and was just, they had the upper hand, I think, for at least the first 20 minutes. And you wondered, was this going to be it for Lee? Because you see guys kind of barking at each other and sniping at each other. And for some teams, that's a good thing. That's how guys are going to have to sort through it, and they get back on assignment, and they get back on track. And then they wound up, Lee winds up getting a corner kick in right in front of the net that just kind of hung around for too long, and somebody was able to bury that for the equalizer. So, a few missed opportunities by either team. I just felt bad that had to be the regional final, because it was just both teams were so great that it's like it doesn't seem fair to some degrees, because I mean, you can't control it, especially in the format that the UIL's got to do. That's pretty much all sports across the board have to kind of follow this method. So that's an instant classic. Something.
Absolutely.
There's a good question here in the chat.
Yeah, we got a question here for you. What does Mike think? So from SA Crimson Idol, what does Mike think about having the state final at an actual soccer-specific stadium, i.e. Toyota Field there in San Antonio? Which is I don't know if you've actually been there, Mike. It's perhaps the most
I think I've driven by it.
Intimate. Yeah, it's perhaps the most intimate place to watch a game because you're right. Seats about, I think, 85, 8,800, something like that, just under 9. But you're right on top of the action. There's truly no bad seat in the house.
Yeah, it's one of those tricky things that I think UIL is a company for business. Like, so I think there's a lot of these where there's agreements to have these sites, and I have no idea what goes into it. It's not a criticism or anything. Obviously, ideally for the sport, I think that's the best way to showcase it. Thankfully, during the state championship games, there wasn't really anything on the official side that you look at and go, this cost somebody a game, or what if this or what if that. Like, pretty much across the board, the games played out as they should. But yeah, in an instance like what happened when like Travis and Lee, like obviously it's great if you were in a field where there's no end zones, there's no goal lines, there's no hash marks, all
Right.
that kind of stuff. It's probably a better way to showcase it. And I hope it goes that route because I think it's just so much better for the sport especially for the high school kids that, you live in the state of Texas, like, you might have some preconceived ideas what you think soccer might or might not be. So, I think if you put it in such a place that it showcases it as best, then, then you have more of a chance of being able to grow a fan base and a following out of it. But how much of that is, I don't know. But I think in an ideal world, that would be perfect, or Austin FC Stadium, which the state that's massive. It seems so difficult to try to navigate all the logistics that come from having to bring teams as far north as the Panhandle, El Paso, to the set. Like, I don't envy a lot of the people that make decisions on that because there's rarely a perfect solution.
Right.
And Coach Perrin mentioned that as well. Like, having to go regional semi to regional final day after, and they do it in other sports too. And I just never, I just feel like it's a detriment to everything you ever work for throughout a season as a coach, that all of a sudden 3-4 months of work now all of a sudden gets decided in 2 days whether or not you got heavy legs or enough depth. But it's with the travel, it's just never a perfect solution. So maybe with this COVID season, that we were kind of forced to have to do things differently, and maybe we'll see some changes that will be better for the long term.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's a spot on assessment. That's one thing, so 2 things really. One, that's what I've been asking every coach is just like, hey, what was your experience? What was your take? Did you like it? Did your squad like it? Because, traditionally that regional tournament and that state tournament, they're on back-to-back nights or back-to-back days.
Yeah.
And so for there to be a good 3-day buffer in between, we saw quality, exceptionally high quality regional finals. And for the most part, I guess you can argue the state finals as well, because otherwise the semifinal, your regional semifinals and your state semifinals, they tend to be all in. And then those finals are very sloppy, very ugly.
Everybody's tired. You're more likely to get hurt.
Right. And then the other point, in terms of location, host site, I mean, you're right. You're never, like everything I think that we realize as professionals, is that you're never going to satisfy everybody. And, and it's nothing against, Georgetown ISD, they do a great job there.
They did fantastic.
Yeah. They do an exceptional job hosting it. I've been there many times. Is it ideal in terms of playing it on not so much the turf field, but a field of football lines at, the state's biggest stage? No, it's not ideal. But then again, you mentioned, let's just say a place like Toyota Field in San Antonio, which would be great. But I would be hard pressed to see staffs, the San Antonio FC field staffs. Same thing up in Austin, Austin with the Austin FC, for you to have either 6 or 12, semifinal matches all on one surface. That would tear up the field, so there's that argument as well. So it's tough.
Yeah, and Coach Dripping Springs talked about that experience, and I think that's the one thing as far as having been a coach, and having played on teams and stuff like that, that it's like you cherish the experiences that you get together. And,
Right.
when you get to spend it in a hotel for 2 days, regardless of you're just absolutely dead by the time you're done playing, like there is still that intrinsic value of this is a memory that'll last a lifetime, and there's something special about it. And also when you get to state championships, you're on the same site, so you get familiar with that, and then you get to just have that entire experience. Whereas I think I've been kind of 50-50 on this, no pun intended, as far as like,
oh, you're supposed to say pun intended,
should
Mike.
be on a separate site.
Yeah.
I did it for a state semifinal for volleyball that was kind of in a remote school, but I mean, the site make the game. I mean, it's great if you have the perfect gyms and the perfect neutral sites, and thankfully, I think there are enough schools that coaches know kind of tend to be what's best. So, I'll be interested to see if they do that format again next year with just the state semifinals neutral site or state semis and a neutral site, and then state finals all gathered. So
right. So I know you mentioned you did give us a shout out, and you were interacted with us, gave us some good insight on one of our Inside Texas High School Soccer episodes, along with Coach Rafa in our our joint partnership with San Antonio Soccer Roundtable. And in one of those episodes where you joined us, you called soccer, in terms of your experience and covering it, you called it the hidden gem of, I guess, Texas high school sports. What do you mean by that, and why?
Well, I mean, it's not on the top of the radar because all these other sports, to their credit, are fantastic. I mean, you have how many Texas guys getting drafted in the NFL draft today?
Right.
You've got elite basketball talent, you've got elite baseball talent, you've got elite softball talent. So there's all these things that for so long we've been so conditioned to follow, and to their credit, because they're terrific. So it's not always something that jumps off the page, because the American following is very sporadic and temporary. Like people may casually watch like the men's and women's U.S. soccer teams. Like MLS, I think, is starting to get more traction, especially in Austin. But with the teams that are good, like the teams that are probably in your top 10 to 20%, like the quality of play is really good. There's going to be room, and I think this year showed too that if you invest your resources in your youth programs and your booster clubs, like you can build a winning program. Like it
Absolutely.
just takes some time, some patience, the right people involved. And, I think it may be easier to make a jump than in some of those other sports where the tradition is really strong, and some schools have more resources and have the ability to continue to like funnel talent through their youth system. So I find it to be a hidden gem, because I think there's, for a lot of coaches, the opportunity to a lot of untapped potential, a lot of talented kids that, hey, maybe they're not into this sport. And it was just a really cool experience. And it's, they're short matches too. So it's not like you have a huge time commitment where, a football game, when you've got the halftime show, it's like 4 hours that you're spending at a football game, and then you get baseball games are sometimes 3.5. So it's got a lot of potential as far as, and I feel the same way about volleyball, that I'm equally as passionate about, as far as like, hey, this is really good play with people that are going to be moving to the next level. So I was having a pretty good time after 6 broadcasts over the weekend. So I was definitely feeling pretty more energetic, I think, by that point in the evening. But I still stand. I think it's fantastic, and I think that the growth potential is going to be really strong.
That's great. That's great to hear. And and for what it's worth, from our perspective, and speaking with Coach Rafa from San Antonio Soccer Roundtable, and myself, because I was plugged in, covering multiple teams, covering on as well as multiple streams. I think just you did an exceptional job, and then just Texan Live their the quality of their broadcast. I was very happy with. I was very impressed. So
Yeah,
kudos, kudos to you all. Kudos to you. Kudos to the organization, to Texan Live. You should be very proud.
Yeah, shout out to everybody on our crew that I've worked with. And when we did the state championships through NFHS, which it has an affiliation with Texan Live. So, I mean, most of those guys work out in Houston. So if I've interacted with them, it's been text. So the weekend was fun for me just because I finally got to meet some of these people, spend time, joke around, and kind of have that camaraderie amongst broadcasters. A lot like I hate to say the word lonely, but it's also like you're very solo in that you're kind of I don't know how you just go from program to season. You're meeting all kinds of different people, and you're kind of your own ilk. Like I don't meet a ton of other broadcasters out there.
Yeah.
And I really appreciated the fact that you guys did the shows that you did, because if not, I really would have been lost during each of those. Because I before each match, I would go back and I'd listen and I'd go, okay, whatever outfit predicted is it. And you guys, I mean, nobody could have predicted Rockwell Heath, but like from even before the state semis, it pretty much went like 11 for 12. I think maybe there's one that escapes me. So I was at least able to have a frame of reference of what to look for. And if, Lou Roche, the play-by-play guy at the time, had something, I at least was not going to sit there going, they're a good team, Lou. And felt like I had a little more substance. So thank you guys, because I got to sound a little bit like I knew what I was talking about.
Absolutely. No, we had a great time. We had a great, because I think on the surface, and you can jump on Twitter and you can just pick teams all day, right? But I think within our shows, within our episodes, we had a lot of back and forth in terms of kind of explanations, what's going on with the roster, what's going on. And the thing that tends to get lost at this level when you get, especially on deep runs in the state tournament, is that coaching matters, right? The experience of coaches, have coaches been there? Do they have the experience level of the rosters? So that type of stuff matters. And we would get into that. We would get, it wasn't just X's and O's and tactics, but it was the storylines, right? And the subplots behind these matchups. Because there were some upsets. Clearly there were, especially those first couple of rounds, there was some serious upsets. So yeah.
I think it speaks so much to like when you're dealing with kids 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19 in some degrees, like it's a lot to be able to go 7 rounds unscathed, because eventually along the road you're gonna come out flat, or the team that you faced has got bulletin board material and they hate your guts and they are coming out to play like bandits, and it's a lot of variance in a single game playoff. So like when we start talking about playoff, and that's the thing that discourages me as a broadcaster, is that if you don't make a deep run of the playoffs, you're a bad coach, or this is not a good program, or that kid's not as good. Like there doesn't always, and I'm not saying this is the case around the board. Most people are reasonable. They realize it's just sports, but with the spotlight that's on coaches now, the pressure, and parents are more and more invested in their kids, so their emotional response is to want a certain outcome, and if it doesn't quite go that way, then things get kind of tense. And some places are different at it than others. So I'm a coach. So my dad was a Hall of Fame basketball coach. I've seen it literally since the time I was 5. Like coaches get too much of the blame when things go wrong, and maybe I'm getting too much of the, and maybe not enough credit when things go right. Maybe all the blame when things go wrong. So, it is. I mean, no surprise that David Rogers gets there to the state finals with the track record that he has. You've put as much time in the game, and if you've been to that stage, you know how to prepare yourself and your kids to stay emotionally level. And I think Coach Parent had the same degree, that it was like, we're so excited we won. And then when you have expectations as to like how you have to stay level and still just go on here to the next match. So I think that's universal across all sports, but soccer is so unique in that sense that it's not like coaches control all the elements. Like they can do a little encouraging and all that kind of. I'm not familiar with what soccer coaches do, but it certainly seems like compared to other sports, they're way in less control than some of the other sports where coaches are dictating a lot of the things that happen in a game.
Yeah. Yeah. It can be very different for sure in terms of, because you don't get to call timeouts. You put in the work during the week with practice, you have the final pregame, tactical discussion, and then you go, and then everything else is in the run of play. You get one other time to make your adjustments. That's at halftime, and that's it. Everything else is in the run of play. So very fluid. And personally, it's part of the challenge that I love about the game. So, but yeah, you talk about coaches, and I'm reminded of an old saying, an old quote that I heard that players, when it comes to the game of soccer, that players win games, coaches lose games, and referees ruin games. So I don't know if you've ever heard that one, but
or officials.
Yeah, officials there. All right, Mike. So as we start, as we start winding down here, what can we expect from you? You in the booth as it relates to soccer and Texan Live next year.
I wonder if we'll start. If I'm definitely going to be more open if they want to do some regular season games. I think the key for us and like Texan Live is primarily out of the Houston area at this point in time. We're expanding a little bit more into Austin, so it's keep developing our crews and keep finding good producers and play-by-play guys so that we can provide as much coverage as we can. I would certainly love to do postseason again. The tough part is like the soccer season kind of coincides with basketball and baseball, so it like I wish there was two of me so I could just go cover every game I could possibly do. So it's I'm so wrapped up in like for the next month between my poker broadcasts and then baseball and softball here for hopefully the next month. Like if you're still working in May, like that's a good sign. That means your team's winning. So I definitely want to continue to kind of keep watching more and preparing more so that it's another sport for me that, hey, 10 years down the road, you never know what could happen as far as a gig that opens for you or an opportunity. I don't try to get caught up in like, I'm the best in this and blah, blah, blah. Like I do take pride that I feel like I'm the most versatile, that whether it's volleyball, football, basketball, baseball, softball, soccer, like bring it today. So, whatever gets me to that point where I'm just like, okay, we got better at this. We got better at this. People are responding well. That's always a priority to me. It's just like take it up a notch and, appease the enthusiasts and the people that are really smart and also be able to speak to people who have never maybe watched soccer before it and try to educate to a degree so that it's like, okay, yeah, you know what, this is pretty good.
Right. He is Mike Jungblut, the play-by-play announcer for the Texan Live. Mike, this has been great. Thank you for being with us. Any for our listeners that we have coaches, student athletes, other podcasters, and not just within the state, but even abroad. Any final words, final thoughts, anything you'd like to share?
Yeah, I think the sports broadcast world is now, because of the technology, is becoming a really big opportunity for the future as far as, when in 2008, that was when the first ever streaming company I ever worked for, we had satellite internet off of like a disk drive type of a deal. We're only just doing audio. So now that these stadiums are integrated with Wi-Fi, gyms are integrated with Wi-Fi, that if you're interested in a sport and play-by-play, like you may not become a professional and you're going to be on CBS Sports or ESPN or anything, but there are more resources now to be able to develop, to get feedback, to work for companies, for people that are passionate about either their local school district or the sport that they cover. And I know there's a lot of people out there in all the networks that are looking for people, that do want people to be involved in like a part-time role. That it's a very satisfying, and for if you can maneuver it with your schedule, I mean, I highly encourage it to kind of continue to keep expanding your bounds. And I know for you in a podcast format, like it takes a while to build an audience. So,
Right.
stay with it, just because there are going to be a lot of moments you're like, why am I doing this? Like this, like how many views do we get? And that kind of, and if you don't focus on that stuff and you just focus on process, and you're a coach. So, I think this is probably second nature to it. Just focus on process and continually keying on things that you can keep getting better at, like the better off you're going to be. And meet as many people as you possibly can. So hey, I want to meet more of my peers. Like I want to see other people have success and continue, because I mean, like if we expand soccer streaming, volleyball streaming, baseball streaming, as broadcasters, we have the ability to be able to move the needle enough to a degree that people
Absolutely.
care about the sports we cover. So been lucky to really work for and with a lot of really great people in all these formats. So I'm bullish on the future. It's a really exciting time.
That's great. Great stuff. Well said. So, Mike, this has been great. Thank you. We're very excited to have you on the show. We're grateful for your time. Our first broadcaster, first sportscaster on the podcast. So, making a little bit more history. So we appreciate your time. We're grateful for it, and we look forward to having you. We look forward to having you on our show, I should say, as a reoccurring guest in the future. Thank you. And for our listeners, don't go anywhere. We'll be right back after a word from these sponsors.